Hello, welcome to B2B Revenue Leaders. I'm your host, Dustin. Today, I'm joined by Jordan Scheltgen, who is the founder and CEO at Cave Social and the host of the Mind Your Marketing podcast. And we're just going to unpack what the content commodity trap is, why getting a bunch of impressions from memes might not be your best strategy, and how a podcast and original content can really create a halo effect for your brand that you'll see the results from year after year. Hey, Jordan, welcome to the show.
Hey, happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you. This is tables have turned a bit. I was on your podcast a while back, so now we're flipping it and I get to interview you, so I'm looking forward to it. Let's just kick off with a question of something you've talked about before. For people following on LinkedIn, they might have a bit of idea of this concept, but what is the content commodity trap?
Yeah, so content commodity trap, something I coined where I noticed a lot of people and brands, people posting on their personal, they were posting the same thing as everybody else. And it was a meme, or it was, hey, we're going to reshare industry news. And that fed their account, that fed their timeline, and it would actually get a decent amount of engagement. But the problem is when brands, or if say a person becomes this news reporter for their industry, they fall into what we call the forgettable messenger. Right? People will remember the message they're delivering, or they will remember that meme or that cultural moment, but they're not going to remember the company that posted it or added that onto their feed. So we can think about things like the Barbie movie. I saw a million memes about the Barbie movie. I couldn't tell you one company who posted one, right? Or there was the very popular Calvin Klein ad with the guy shirtless on the roof, and then a suitcase company posted it. And what happens is when you follow these trends and take on that, now the consumer's brain is competing with 1, 2, maybe 3 things to try and remember to have brand recall from that post. So it's a trap because it'll get a lot of engagement. And if you're just sharing industry news, for instance, doing a breakdown of, hey, here's the latest that happened with whatever company that's fundraising, or TikTok's doing this, or Salesforce is doing that. The news itself is interesting, but you, in large, actually aren't interesting just for sharing that. So we consult companies and we say, look, you can take this stuff, but you better bolt your opinion onto it. People, like, you're being paid for your opinion. People are following you for your opinion. They're not following you to get a news feed. They could go find that anywhere. So they want your unique opinion on those things. And then also they want original content from your brand, not just trend chasing, not just memes. So yeah, it's finding that balance and not falling into the trap, because the engagement metrics will make you think that memes are the greatest thing and that your accounting software should start going all in on memes. And it's really not the case.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting if you look back, I don't know, like 5 years ago, being a content aggregator was maybe actually a viable strategy back then because there weren't as many. Whereas now, like you said, there's just so much noise. I get so much news throughout the day. I have no idea where I see most of it. Pops up my Google feed. I read something random on LinkedIn. So I get that. And do you think this is a function of people chasing impressions? Is it a function of too much noise out there? Like, why do people seem to be doing this?
I think it's like a drug, right? This like impressions and these engagements come through. So then we went through this phase of the last 10 years in tech yelling, pivot quickly, iterate, take lessons, learn, make changes. And it's a general philosophy, sure. But with marketing, sometimes it's, hey, let's take a second. Maybe speed isn't as valuable as we think. So I think there's a combination of, hey, I posted this meme with 3 Spider-Men pointing at each other from my software company, and it got a bunch of engagement. Oh, I should do more of that.
Yeah.
So there's a reward cycle there for the marketer, and they can go, look, we have all these impressions, we have all these things. But I think largely the executive seats are going to see that as it makes the marketing department, particularly social, be seen as an unserious part of the business. So I think there's that. I think there's a place for those things. And if it's to the ethos of the brand, you can do it. 2, it's extremely cheap to make that content. And it's easy. You can do it consistently. Original content's harder to do. That happens with I know a lot of your listeners are in the SaaS space. What I see when we work with SaaS clients is we'll come in and there's one marketing person who's doing like 28 jobs, or one social person they're managing way too many platforms. So they're going to try to stretch content as far as they can. Meme content, being a news aggregator helps them do that. So I think it's a function of time restriction, with maybe some hollow or diet impressions that they get from that content.
Yeah, totally. It's a quality or quantity thing. I think people also see big examples of brands that have had success with that and don't realize like they have a whole damn content team focused on this. Oreo will spin up an original meme, or Wendy's will do something that goes viral, but that's not a 23-year-old who was hired for 40 grand doing that.
Yeah. You can look at HubSpot, right? So HubSpot, Monzo Bank, let's go in the professional space. These two companies, they make meme content. They do a great job. It's not scalable though. They have internal team members, which are internet obsessed. I've had them on. I know these people. They're one-of-one people that you can't just scale across to different companies. Two, it's only part of their strategy. It's not their whole thing. They still have amazing original content that leads. So they're using, they use this content, which I actually agree with this, is we call it like bites and bangers. So you can use meme content to create little bites to get in people's feed, but you better follow it up with original content to keep them around and get them interested in you. So if it's part of a strategy, cool. But the trap is when it's only bites and it's only memes and then there's nothing original. So yeah, when I look at these companies and big Fortune 500 brands, they have full teams and agency support, you name it. A Series A startup maybe isn't in the same position when they look at their social team.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned, I like the bites and bangers idea. So that original content, you admit it, it's hard to do. It's hard to make. It's really hard to do well as well. There's a lot of research studies or a lot of here's my opinion, and a lot of it is tepid at best. Like there's not really an opinion. So how do you think through that? Is it, hey, you need to actually stand out and some people don't like it? That's not a bad thing. You're not for everyone. Or how do you work through brands with that when maybe they're a little bit afraid?
So we do a couple things. I would looking at we'll talk in the lens of social, but this really goes across all marketing. I want to look at, okay, what are the pillars that we stand for? What's our competitive differentiator? And is there content we can create around that? So Burger King, fire is better, right? They're going to create content around, look at the charbroiled burger is better than McDonald's, Wendy's, whatever. Two, if you have a champion product or SKU or feature that you can market, I like to make content around that. Can you tie that in? Three, is there a company value, like one true value that you can lean into, right? We were talking with a company. One of their values is they want to leave their customer in a good mood. So we were like, let's hire somebody to give compliments to customers as they leave your business. And we'll film them giving compliments, because that, although in a vacuum doesn't seem tied back to the company, it actually is. And then we look at also for smaller brands, challengers, we're like, you can talk, and for personal brand, what's your prickly opinion? What's the thing that you are going to put your flag down and say, no, we believe in this? I'm doing it here on this podcast by saying like, my flag is down that memes aren't going to help create brand recall and are not really that great for the brand. That is my little prickly opinion in the sea of social media experts, so be it. So that's where I look at, can we go down that line? Can we create stuff there? And then how do we package that? Do we package that through personal stories, listicles, customer stories, or maybe a community story or event? And can we latch that onto our differentiator, a value we stand for, one of the champion features, products, et cetera, and move down that way?
Yeah. So I mean, obviously a lot more strategic approach as let's make content 5 days a week on these days and figure it out later. So I think that's the key takeaway is sometimes there's just like this quota piece of, oh no, we missed our Thursday post. Whereas if you have a strategy, maybe that's not the end of the world. One thing I want to dive into, you mentioned there is personal brand. And I'm curious how, I'm sure you work with companies where you help them on their company brand, their business brand, as well as maybe the leadership team's personal brands. And how to explain this? Like how connected should those be? And how do you think through, the COO is going to talk about one thing, VP marketing is going to have a different opinion. How do you blend all that together?
Yeah, founder brands, founder-led marketing, that's all the rage right now. I'm actually advising brands not to over-index its importance, just because the algorithm is giving personal accounts a boost on LinkedIn right now. There's an obvious pitfall to this, which is executives leave companies and over-investing in their personal social media and trying to craft a voice for them. One, can come across as disingenuous. Two, we see a lot of people are hiring the same ghostwriters, and it's painfully obvious. Maybe not to the end consumer, but I see it. Yep. So we look at it as anytime we get executives involved, what we'd want to do is, okay, what do they actually create interviews, maybe an interview like this, and can we pull nuggets out and then package content based on their actual opinion or things they've done? But we see that as more of an auxiliary thing or an attachment to the brand, but the brand messaging should really be forward, unless it's like an owner, founder who's not going anywhere. Then I think there's like a little bit of nuance there. But going in and having the CIO or CMO or COO and putting all the eggs in that basket can be risky when they get a job somewhere else in 6 months. So that's something we've seen.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think take the agency space, for example, where it's a founder, this is their agency, they spun it up. Yeah, I could see maybe investing there. Then you get the flip side where like Drift, for example, was known as like Dave Gerhardt and Dave Cancel's brand. And then now that they're not there, there's maybe not that personal attachment that kind of fell off. So I think people follow the people. Another thing you do mention, though, is this halo effect, both for personal brand as well as professional, like business brand. So how does that tie into this? And what exactly does that mean?
Yeah. So a little context here. I started a podcast during COVID, started making clips, started sending it out. You were a guest on that podcast. And what I started to see really quickly was, whoa, okay, I'm now meeting people at conferences. They're coming up to me. Oh, hey, Jordan, like I was on your show, this, that. I want you to meet John. He also listened to my episode. Oh, I'm like, dang, okay, cool. So one, people recognizing me and having some sense of who I am before we ever meet in person has been, it puts the wind at my back when it comes to sales and having to go through and do that. Two, I think that it's the greatest from a personal brand perspective. My opinions and what I stand for is going to broaden out to people who agree with it. And I'm actually going to get those types of ideal clients in. So we went through an exercise. I created, okay, what's our ICP? We made a full persona. And now I just ask myself, like we have this CMO Marcus character. And I'm creating everything for this because that's the type of client I want to attract. And what I've seen is as we put out more content and think through that lens, that person ends up contacting us, or friends end up being like, oh, this would resonate with another CMO, whatever. And they'll actually introduce us via LinkedIn. So we started the podcast in 2020 and it's approaching like 30% of our book now has been either a previous guest or somebody who was connected to a previous guest who reached out to us. So it's been something too that, for us, the proof's been in the pudding, really, when it comes down to it.
Yeah. So I'm curious how, like when you went into it, was that the plan or was it, I just want to have a podcast, talk to like-minded people? Because I find if you go into it thinking like, I need to get revenue from these people, that's when it doesn't work so good.
When we sat down, my wife is a co-owner of the agency and creative director. We sat down and we said, okay, if we do this, we're not creating some like cornball show that's really just faking people into having a meeting with us and like playing on their ego to get them on a call. And there's really no show. So we said, okay, the show has to stand on its own two legs. And we believed, or the hypothesis was that if we went in, created a show and just tried to make the best content possible for marketers, that would lead to really increased perceived expertise and authority in the industry, and to an increase of lead volume and actually attributable sales from the show. So we did that. You were a guest. I'm sure you can attest to it. I didn't try to sell you anything after, and that was 2 years ago.
Nope.
It was just like, here's the show. Cool. Awesome. Here are the clips. Like we put it out because I believe that customers, and I believe that in our case, the CMOs, the people we're pitching to, VPs, they're not stupid. And they're going to know if they're put into some funnel right away. And that is, talk about killing a relationship before it even gets off the ground. To me, that's, it just, I don't know. I find that corny. So we didn't want to have that. And then now with the show's at 250 something episodes. It stands on its own two legs, and the revenue and the people coming through to the business, it's more of a bonus now than anything.
Yeah. So after this, I shouldn't put you in a 3 email sequence to get you to buy what we do. Eh? It's not the move.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's funny though, because it seems so obvious with the podcast, but that's still a strategy with so much other marketing. be it webinars or community events or you name it, that's still in the back of their mind. It's a, hey, how can I get money from these people type of play. So would you advise your clients then, outside of doing a podcast or personal branding on LinkedIn or any of that, is that kind of just a consistent theme of, hey, provide value, don't actually pitch these people?
Yeah, I went to a conference 6 months ago, and little did I know it was all paid speaking slots. So it turned into just pitch 1, 2, 3, pitch 1, 2, 3. And I don't know. I was falling asleep. Like, it was just so bad. And then one of the companies got up there, and they're like it was an app. But anyways, he got up and did nothing related to his company, told this amazing story about this brand here in LA, it's built, and just like this crazy story, basically. And what happened was everybody at the end wanted to talk to him about how refreshing his talk was. And he made it not about his company, not the pitch. He just tried to actually deliver value for 45 minutes. And he had a lineup of people talking to him at the end. Now you're on LinkedIn. And I just think about it. That's the way to do it, where we advise our clients. I go, it's not about being in the hallway of a conference and like throwing your little squish balls and magnets at people when they're like trying to get to lunch.
Yeah.
I look for how can we create moments where we actually give value. And a lot of people say that, but truly create an environment or create something where it doesn't turn into a pitch or like a borderline coercive buy from me thing because I bought this dinner at Nobu type of situation. Yeah. So I think about that is how can I create and then customers, I think, will find their way to your SaaS on their own accord.
Yeah, I think one thing people might be thinking is when you came up with the podcast, it was you and your wife making the decision. You gave it time to grow. Like, I'm sure in the first year, returns were, like you were starting to see signs, things were picking up, people were recognizing you, all that sort of stuff. But if you had a CMO, CFO to answer to and was like, hey, show me the ROI of this thing or stop doing it, I think that's where people get stuck. You know what I mean? Like they want to do something that's valuable, and then it just gets nixed right away because they can't prove the value right away.
This is my frustration with B2B in general is we have in industry a lot of stuff that's looking at a 12 to 18 month sales cycle. And then we try to measure things in quarters. And I did this marketing work, and it drives me nuts because I'm like, if the game is 4 quarters long, why are we measuring 4 plays? Like, it's just not the right way to look at it. I understand there's external pressure, there's investors, we got to hit numbers, all of those things. But when we go in and pitch things, and it might not be a podcast, it might be a video series, it might be a crazy content blog thing we want to do and actually create awesome content, whatever you're doing, events, we get really realistic with our time frame on that. And we go, okay, like in our case, when we did the pod, we said, we're willing to do 50 episodes. That's going to be our litmus test. If we get to 50 and we just did our best and we can't attribute anything back to the show and we're not enjoying it, okay, we'll shut it down. And it was like 9 episodes in, we had somebody reach out to become a client. So I was like, oh, okay. This is insane. So that was like, we got very early positive feedback, but we were willing to go to 50. And that was, I think, the appropriate timeline to see, is this worth it from content generation perspective, lead gen, helping with brand lift, et cetera.
Yeah. And I think maybe this is a bit of a soapbox moment being in marketing for a while, but I think that's partly why like CMO or marketing tenure is so low as well, because they do these plays and then they get canned before they actually see the value. Then the next person comes in and reaps the rewards of it, right? So I think there's a bit of that companies run into. Hopefully less so now that funding isn't, 2 years ago, everyone was just handing out $100 million checks, it seemed, to every SaaS company, and it's a little bit different now. But yeah, I do think there's something there where marketers get it, non-marketers maybe don't, and they just don't have the patience to wait to see it come to fruition.
And I think there's something there. I'm very passionate about this with marketers in general, where we have to fight to not be seen as the arts and crafts department. So whatever that means in like finding the value of a targeted impression, let's say, not just like we were saying, the content of whatever, I do a TikTok dance and get impressions, but I go, okay, if we have a bunch of video content or podcasts that we know are answering questions that our customers have, that we either have through survey data or we've looked at Google, we looked at our current website where people visit. Okay, I'm going to value those impressions on much higher than just the generic content. So then I want to take that and go, what is this worth? And if I can sit with the executives and get buy-in to go, cool, here are the KPIs, here's the value, or here's the thing we need to own, right? What metric we need to own, and putting some value towards it. It might not be perfect, but putting something towards it, then it gives you something, at least when you're at your review, to be like, look, this is working based on what we outlined and thought. We maybe need to adjust one or two things, but we saw it in 23. Budgets, interest rates go up, budgets get slashed, and marketers, if you weren't, anyone who wasn't proxy to or close to revenue got the axe. So it was like, how do we prevent that in the future? I think it's through, getting comfortable talking through that data and trying to just own some part of this funnel, whatever it may be. With content.
Yeah. I like the some proxy of revenue, because it's not always as direct as, like, even take what we do, right? Video testimonials. I don't think there's any person who will say customer stories don't have an impact, but I can't tie, I created this video, it made these 4 deals come in, that was the only reason. Like, it's not how marketing works. It's the sum of its parts. So you have to look at those different, even running LinkedIn ads, right? Same thing. A lot of it isn't direct selling. It's you run it, you track, are the companies actually seeing it? Are those companies coming in down the funnel? So I like the idea of thinking of, what is the story you have to tell with the data, not just how many clicks, how many buys, what's our conversion? Because that's just, I wish it worked that easy. We would all be super rich and our jobs would be incredibly easy, but it's just not how it works.
Yeah, the model of, I'm going to spend a bunch of money to get people to go through some gated content and get an ebook, and then that lead that never actually converts, that's dead. So I'm just like, or it's expensive more than anything. So I just think about this, and especially if we're selling 5-6 figure licensing software deals, it's going to take multi-touch point. It's going to take a lot of content, and then it's going to take the right opportunity for them to need to change vendors, all to come together at once. So it's not I wish it was just click buy, but that doesn't, we're not selling t-shirts. So
Exactly. Yeah, no, totally. So I think the common theme here we've touched on is think ahead of time. Like, as simple and as dumb as that sound is, have a strategy for all of this. Don't throw things at the wall. Don't throw the squish balls at people at events. Think about what you're going to do. So Jordan, I know we could probably go on and on about this. We covered a lot of topics. If people are interested in this, they want to learn more, connect with you or your company, where should they go for that?
Yeah, you can check out, we're at cavesocial.com, or if you want to hear our podcast, check out, it's the Mind Your Marketing podcast. So those are probably the 2 best places.
Awesome. So we'll include those links. As you said, I was a guest on the podcast. It's a great show. So for our listeners, if you like this show, you'll like his show. So go check it out. Jordan, thanks for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode. My key takeaway is just about how chasing that dopamine hit of impressions just isn't worth it. I mean, since attributing revenue to social can be difficult at the best of times, really, using impressions as a fallback is really tempting, but it can lead to trend chasing and meme content that really doesn't get close to any real revenue or attributable results. I mean, that's fine in moderation. I wouldn't tie to a strategy. It can work well, but it just shouldn't be your go-to move. So that's all for this episode. If you enjoyed it, please head on over to wherever you listen to your podcast and click subscribe. And as always, I'll be back next Tuesday with a new episode.